This is The Frontier, a simple Minecraft world with an amazing story. Originally created in 2020, The Frontier has changed ownership and seen many players come and go. Similar to the popular Minecraft civilization experiments, players are encouraged to build nations and group settlements. However, unlike these experiments, there is no time limit, and players aren't forced to actually do anything. They are free to come and go as they please, delivering a more authentic experience. Instead of always ending in the same war arc, some conflicts are solved by skilled diplomacy. That being said, with invites extended to friends of friends, not everyone gets along. In this series, we will follow the story of the Frontier as it plays out, for better or for worse. This is the lore of our Minecraft world. Generally, the history of the Frontier is divided into two sections, the Classical period and the Modern period. The two are marked by a completely different set of players and a different center of civilization. The Classical period, also known as the First Era, is a very mysterious and largely undocumented time in the world's history. Additionally, the exact location of the events of the First Era are now forgotten. There are only 2 players from the First Era still alive and active, and we'll get to that in a minute. The 2 eras are separated by a long period of inactivity. We can't be sure how long, but this time is usually referred to as the Lost Era. It begins with the event that ended the Classical, the fall of Agrios, and ends when a player named Zippers emerges from another portal near the world's spawn. This marks the start of the Modern period and is where our story begins. If you're interested in the Classical period, you can find all that we currently know in our History of the First Era video that I will link at the end of this one. But anyway, after a long and arduous journey through the hellish landscapes of the Nether, Zippers manages to build a portal, returning to the overworld near the world's spawn. The portal forms in the side of this unusual sandstone pillar, on the boundary between a lush jungle and a vast desert. On the south side of the pillar, a river flows from the jungle and cascades down into the caverns below, forming a beautiful natural waterfall. On the first night, Zippers set up camp in a small cave adjacent to the falls. Although the area was dark, Zippers' time in the Nether hadn't exactly left him defenseless. He emerged from the portal donning a full set of netherite armor, being the first player ever to have forged it. Down the road, his armor would play a key role in his rise to power. Weary from his extensive travels in the Nether, he decided to settle right where he was and began to turn the cave into a home. Soon after this, the first player of the Modern Era joined, a player named Branded. Together, they formed the settlement that they called New Braavos. Zippers started the first mining operation in the caverns below the waterfall, and Branded worked on farms and natural resources across the river. Some days later, the two were joined by a third player, Dragon, mob farmer, miner, and industrialist extraordinaire. They knew that he was the person who could advance their new settlement into prosperity. Upon joining, Dragon was given a very important assignment: find spruce wood. Zippers already had an Arabian style in mind, but he needed spruce to contrast with the yellow sandstone. This also drove Zippers to found the Explorers Guild, a group whose purpose was to explore and document the world around them through mapping. Dragon set off on the first expedition with a collection of maps, an axe, and a dream. Starting from the river that ran northward, he made his way by boat out to the eastern sea. In his absence, Branded began his river villa and Zippers gathered resources. Eventually, Dragon returned with a shipload of logs and, more importantly, saplings. In the eastern sea, he had discovered an island chain, aptly named the Spruce Isles, which had forests of the sought-after wood. Apparently, the main island also harbored a village, but Dragon spoke little of his interaction with the natives. With the desired wood at his disposal, Zippers built his first structure. Originally meant to be a house, it ended up being a temple and an archway, leading to the stairs down into the caves. From then on, the players continued to expand their reach, and by extension, their settlements. Branded and Dragon explored the upper Noros River and founded the terracotta dripstone mines as a joint venture. Additionally, Zippers discovered a desert village to the west, which he named Sandhill Haven. Here began the economy of New Braavos, and Zippers spent his days traveling back and forth making small trades. Until, of course, he encountered a librarian villager, someone who could provide the players with enchantment, particularly access to mending, something Zippers desperately wanted. This discovery sparked several new constructions: a storage barn to consolidate resources, and a villager housing unit that would eventually become a trade hall. With Dragon's help, a rail line was established between the settlements for the purpose of moving the desired villagers to the housing unit. During this operation, Dragon became particularly interested in the town of Sandhill. The story goes that while exploring the local area, he fell down a sinkhole which led him to discover that the village was underlain by a very large, lush cavern system. To others, just a pretty cave, but to him, an economic opportunity. He knew that the stonemasons of Sandhill would trade 1 emerald for 10 pieces of clay, a very good deal given its abundance. Eager to bring wealth and development to their new city, Branded and Zippers agreed to grant Dragon domain over the village. In exchange for a cut of the profit, Zippers lent out his netherite shovel, enchanted with Fortune 3. Dragon then founded the East Desert Clay Mining Company, and using initial harvests, the industrial factory was built above the deposits, with elevators and hopper systems to carry and store materials. Along with this, the original rail line was augmented to carry shipments from the factory and deliver them to a newly built rail station in New Braavos. Under the company's directive, more villagers, including the Masons, were moved from Sandhill to New Braavos to build up the trade hall. Over time, crops, workstations, and other blocks were looted from the village and taken to be used in new construction. Empty houses were repurposed or salvaged for various small projects, leaving the factory town in a state of disrepair. But the emeralds kept rolling in, and having established an economic foundation, Dragon began to branch out into mass production or harvest of other resources, and the company rebranded itself simply as the East Desert Company. The great forges of the industrial factory allowed for large shipments of smooth sandstone, from which Zippers built the World Pyramid. It was designed to hold a map of the world as it was slowly filled out by the Explorers Guild. After its completion, 3 new players joined the world: Beck, a friend of Branded, and through him, Mick and Meaningless. Beck was hesitant about joining a world that was so old, as he preferred that everyone start at the same time. After some persuasion, he joined New Braavos, but declined any starter packages or gear, wanting to get everything himself. He butted heads with Dragon from the start, fundamentally disagreeing with his methodology and playstyle. Nonetheless, he still wanted to be a part of the community. Beck decided to build himself a house on this grassy hill just north of the main city. However, he climbed up only to find it had been completely stripped down to stone, but done so in such a way that it was invisible from below. As it turned out, this was part of an EDC agricultural project, and that was the last straw. Beck professed his disdain for the First World, industry, and its apparent break from the traditional soul of Minecraft. With that, he disappeared into the southern jungles. As for his 2 companions, Mick proved to be an ungovernable prankster and was pushed out of New Braavos by Zippers. After hanging around Sandhill for a while, he too eventually disappeared to the south. Meaningless stayed around as a representative of the East Desert Company, often traveling between the 2 settlements. He also assisted in the second phase of the aforementioned agricultural project, placing all of the dirt into a massive potato plantation west of the city. The company prospered during this time and became the world's leading producer of building blocks, fuel, and iron. A proponent of sustainability, Branded facilitated the construction of this building called the Onion, which contained an industrial smoker used to dry out kelp from the river. Dried kelp was then distributed to furnaces throughout the city and shipped off to the factory, replacing their original fuel, blaze rods of all things. But as the city grew, so too did Meaningless's apparent discontent. One day, he attempted to call a council meeting of all the players to, quote, expose the truth. He was promptly kicked from the call and driven out of the city by Dragon, fleeing to the southwest. But this would not be the last time he set foot in New Braavos. A few days later, Branded was working on his new swimming pool when a rain of arrows descended from the jungle, and the villa was attacked by a group of pillagers. Taken by surprise, Branded's call for aid was answered by Zippers, and together the 2 successfully repelled 2 attacks from the trees. However, this proved to be a calculated diversion. With Zippers drawn over to the river villa, the trade hall was left unguarded and was set upon by an army from the southwest, led by Meaningless himself to destroy the city. With Branded and Zippers unable to reach the hall in time, most of the villagers were killed, and Meemless set nearly every structure on fire with a flint and steel. When the two did reach the hall, the pillager horde was unending. As soon as one raid finished, another immediately began. Overwhelmed, they were driven up on top of the pyramid, desperately shooting arrows as enemies climbed up on all sides. At the same time, Meemless pillared up and began shooting at the pyramid with a firework launcher. Things weren't looking good, but just as all hope seemed lost, Dragon finally arrived from Sandhill, shooting Meemless off of his pillar from behind. He landed amidst the pillagers, some of which turned to face him. Seizing this opportunity, Zippers blitzed down from the pyramid and Meemless was nearly killed, fleeing again to the southwest. By many accounts, the attack had been successful, but at what cost? In so doing, Meemless had inadvertently handed Branded and Zippers a great power. When the last of the pillagers were slain, each player was left with no less than 3 totems of Undying, magical relics capable of forestalling death itself. With these, and full netherite armor, Zippers became an unstoppable force, one hell-bent on revenge. Shortly after the battle, he set off into the desert on horseback, tracking down the rebel leader. A few days later, he arrived at a new village, with a pillager outpost and signs of player activity. While investigating one of the houses, Zippers was doomed to fall into a dripstone spike trap under the floor. In an ironic twist of fate, he survived by using a totem of Undying that he got from the Battle of Braavos. Meemless, who sprung the trap manually from inside, quickly found himself cornered in town square. Wait, if you kill me, you'll never know the truth. After killing Meemless, Zippers laid waste to the village, rounding up the citizens and shipping them back to New Braavos to replace the trade hall losses. He also captured the pillager captain Manus Piltigar. Even to this day, he serves as a warning and a deterrent to any future raiders. These events changed Zippers' mentality dramatically. In his eyes, the only way to safeguard the city was to have complete control. He would no longer leave anything to chance, and nothing could transpire without his say-so. Branded expressed concern for this new, oppressive ideology, and ultimately creative and moral differences led to the split of the River Villa from the city, and the dissolution of New Braavos into Branded's Free Republic on one side of the Noros, and Zippers' Emirate on the other. New Emirate law included strict codes and building guidelines, with a wall being erected around the new city. The wall flew banners bearing the new Emirate's sigil, the all-seeing eye. Signs around the gates bore their new motto, peace through order, order through force. The message was clear: dissent would no longer be tolerated. On the opposite bank, Republic borders remained open, boasting fair trade and no building restrictions. Next, the new emirate declared their territory, annexing Sandhill and forcibly moving the remaining villagers to the new capital, Tanis. The ruined village was renamed Sodo, effectively becoming the Emirate's industrial district. Despite the turmoil, new players continued to join, and in one case, old ones returned. A player named Flooded arrived by boat from the Eastern Sea. It had taken many months, but using only a compass to guide him, he had made it all the way back to the world spawn. Flooded is the only other player remaining from the First Era, and Zippers and he were close friends. Wishing to start his own settlement, he partnered with the Explorers Guild to find the island where he would found the Shogunate. New players to the world, Crow, Quote, and Rabid, joined shortly thereafter. They sought refuge in the Emirate, but Zippers was not yet willing to let anyone else build in Tanis, so the trio began the Affordable Housing District, more commonly referred to as the Undercity, where players could do whatever they wanted, within reason, so long as they stayed out of sight. After gathering supplies, Quote loaded up a ship and sailed north to found a new settlement of his own. Unsure of what to do, Crow was offered a chance to make some money tending the potato fields, an offer he took great offense to, likening it to indentured servitude. In the heat of the moment, he declared himself a liberator and said he would ride for the trade hall villagers' freedom. Needless to say, he was swiftly exiled from Tanis and guided by the guild to a mountainous island in the south that he called Marine. Rabbit, on the other hand, marketed his talents as a redstone engineer and was quickly employed by the East Desert Company and set to work on new projects. As a showcase of both wealth and power, Zippers began the construction of the Emmer's Palace, set to be the world's largest structure. Collectively, these events left the world with more civilizations than ever before: the Emirate, the Free Republic, 3 up-and-coming new settlements, and 2 players completely unaccounted for. To help boost international relations, Zippers built the Tanis City Bank, which served as a safety deposit and a way station for international shipping. The modern age had begun with a single, centralized civilization, but now had multiple city-states scattered far and wide across the land. What does the future hold for the frontier? Only time will tell. Like what you see? Consider dropping a like or subscribing so you never miss the latest lore. With that, I've been the Minecraft Historian. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.